we got a big class coming up, so snuggle in, get yourself some coffee, and as usual, we got a big topic. So I want to begin by thanking you all for being here tonight, because Eve of Thanksgiving, it's busy timing, but to make a class happen takes commitment. I want to thank you for that commitment and making this class happen. So those of you who are here in person, those of you here on Zoom, and it's wonderful. This is what it's all about. Here we go. So World of Kabbalah, we're doing lesson 4. It's a big class. What can I tell you? See, you guys already don't believe me. I cry wolf every single class that it's big. Okay, so every class is always big and deep, especially in this course. But this class is exceptional. It's a little bit abstract. It's quite something. So let us jump in. I want to dedicate today's class in loving memory of Herbert and Sylvia Serlin and Kenneth Andrew Lesser, and of course to dedicate our Torah study tonight to our brothers and sisters in the Holy Land, that they should be delivered and they should have the successes and the safety and security and the miracles that they need, that we need, and especially those who are still in captivity. We should only have good news. So, lesson 4 is titled, you ready for this one over here? Lesson 4, the world of chaos. So,
finally something I understand.
Something relatable, huh? This is a topic of Kabbalah that is very fascinating and quite unexplored. Even within Kabbalah explorations, this is really this is going really deep into the whole divine system. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, the world of chaos. And I want to first start off with a story. All right? This story happened in Ukraine. There's a Russian army jeep, and they start driving towards the Ukrainian platoon, and they have white surrender flags waving out the window. And they come to the Ukrainians and they say, we surrender. We don't want to surrender, but our jeep is out of gas and it's broken, and we got no choice, so we're surrendering to you. So the Ukrainians say, all right, well, we'll take you prisoners of war, we'll tie your hands up, and let's go check out your truck. So they bring it to the guy in the back who's fixing all the equipment. He takes a look at it, and they bring back the report to the Russians. They say, your Jeep was a big mess. Your gas tank had a bunch of holes. Your oil tank was punctured. Your timing belt was snapped, and your radiator was cracked. They said, the radiator was cracked? I don't remember doing that. All right.
That's good.
All right. Well, it's a deep story. Okay. Before we jump into the world of chaos, let us begin like this. On page 111, we have a little bit of an exercise. Take a pen if you have one. I'm not going to ask you for the results over here, but I want you to give very, very honest responses for yourself to these statements. Yes or no. If any of these statements apply to you, yes. If it does not apply to you whatsoever, then you could write a no. And if anybody needs a pen, we got more here, courtesy of the Jewish Federation of Metropolitan Detroit. Here, we got it over here. Now let's see. All papers and pens. There we go.
Now I got to answer very quickly.
All right, how are we doing? We answered the questionnaire. All right. So it's a little bit personal. I'm not going to ask you for any results, but I want to ask you two questions. Did you find it difficult to give definitive answers to some, to any, to all these statements?
Yes.
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 Are we on the same page with that? Did you find yourself giving contradictory yeses?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Now this is not new. This is the story of us. And what we're seeing over here is that humans are very, very complex creatures. There's like an internal struggle that goes on inside of us. And if we're honest with ourselves, we can really see it over here. On the one hand, we're not a selfish person. You know, we want to understand that we are living for something higher. At the same time, you know, sometimes we are selfish. I would never want to hurt somebody, but sometimes I just can't help but feel that, and I hate feeling it, the joy when somebody else fails. Oh, you know, it's good. He didn't get.
What if it's Hamas failing?
No, I'm not talking about that. Let's talk about somebody who you don't wish any ill to, and but that's your competitor.
That's my whole answer.
No. So you got to no. So now you got to change it. We mean no. So we mean Hamas. We mean like a friend, a relative, somebody that you're in conflict with, somebody that there's friction between you, and all of a sudden something goes wrong for them. Good for them. You get this little pang of, and etc. All these things are constantly, we are experiencing these contradictory feelings going on inside of us. We're complex creatures. On the one hand, we all know that we have within us a lot of altruism. We are attracted to spirituality. We want to connect to God. And we know that deep inside of us we want to have meaningful lives. But at the same time, we're also dominated by these selfish drives and hedonistic instincts. And at some times, it's like both at the same time. You know, who am I? Who's the real me? Now, for all of those who've been coming to classes here before, and of those of you who have studied Tanya, you all know what the answer is to this very basic question. One of the core fundamentals of Kabbalah, the understanding of how Hasidus teaches us about the human psyche, is that we don't have one soul, we have two souls. That's the big revelation. We don't have one soul, we have two souls. And that's why we feel this conflict. So let's read a little bit about the two souls, get us a little bit familiar with it, because this is a very important concept for today's class. Here, Max, why don't you begin us off over here, page 112.
Two souls. The first of our souls originates in non-holiness. This soul resides in our bloodstream to vitalize our body. It is the source of all our negative character traits, as well as those positive traits that come naturally to us, such as compassion and kindness. A Jew's second soul is an actual part of the transcendent God.
Oh, okay. We got two souls going on over here. Let's start describing these two souls. The first soul, which originates in non-holiness, it's not holy, in the language of Kabbalah, the language of Hasidus, we call this the animal soul. What's the animal soul? Well, it doesn't mean that it's like the soul of an animal. It doesn't mean that you and an elephant share the same soul. But what it does mean is that it's a soul which is very animalistic, very animal-like. What's an animal all about? Instinct.
Immediate self-gratification.
Well, let's just keep it to self.
Survival.
What is an animal about? The self. Me, myself, and I. That's it. That's the only thing that matters. That's a whole, an animal does not process any other reality besides, what do I want to do right now? What am I in the mood of? What gives me gratification? That's it. That is the life of an animal. And that is the essential nature of this first soul, which we call the animal soul. Number one, its basic focus is survival and physical needs. What do I want? How do I get it? How do I make more of myself? How do I amplify myself? Right? This is the basis of all natural reality. It's out there for gratification. Here's the interesting thing. Text 1 just told us it has a lot of negative character traits, as you could imagine, right? An animal soul that has nothing else other than itself as a drive, you know, it's not going to be the nicest, most pleasant person to be around. But there's also a lot of positive traits. Now, the animal soul is not evil. It doesn't have negative traits because it's a bad soul. It's actually quite neutral. But it's just very, very, very self-centered. That's it. That's its whole life. Now, it could even do good. And I want to put that up over here. It could even do positive traits. But it's always going to be what we call self-oriented. It's always going to be self-oriented. What does it mean, self-oriented? Could the animal soul do good? It could do a lot of good. But it only does it when it wants to. It only does it how it wants to. It only does it because it wants to. It's not doing good for the sake of doing good. It's not doing goodness for altruism, out of an act of sacrifice for the greater good. It's just self-centeredness, primal desire, and sometimes the animal soul also likes doing good things. Why? Because I want to do it. That is the essence of the animal soul. Me, myself, and I. That's the whole story. That's all that matters in life. It could do good, and it could also sometimes get out of hand, the animal soul. It could get so self-obsessed, so self-centered, maybe even so narcissistic, and so short-sighted, that it ends up actually falling into really bad behavior, immoral behavior, cruelty. All evil tendencies come from the animal soul. And this is called, I want you to remember the term, it's in your books on page 112, and I'll put it up here on the screen as well. This is called the animal soul, Nefesh HaBahamit, the human soul that is self-oriented and can trigger immoral behavior. That's soul number one. Now, we all know the soul very well, right? That from the moment that a baby is born, they are fully in touch with this animal soul. They sense their own hungers, they cry out. That's a baby. A baby doesn't know yet of any larger reality. Its whole reality, the moment a baby is born, is only its own consciousness. All about myself. What do I want? What do I need? I go to sleep when I want. I wake up when I want. I wake up the whole family when I want. It's on my schedule. That's soul number one. The second soul is called the godly soul. A piece of God. That's what the text says over here. A holy piece of God. This soul is the absolute opposite of what the animal soul stands for. The animal soul only senses itself. It doesn't see itself as part of a larger divine plan, as part of a larger divine system. It's fully entrenched. The animal soul is fully entrenched in its own existence. The godly soul senses the larger picture. It's a piece of God. And therefore, its whole drive is also very godly, very altruistic, very spiritual, very mission-oriented. The divine soul wants a relationship with God. The divine soul wants a relationship with other souls. The animal soul sees everybody else as a threat. It's like little kids. Little kids naturally see other little kids as threats. Thank God I have 4 kids. Every single one of them, when they start going to a play group, what do they start suffering from? They start fighting with other kids. That's what kids do. There's a toy and there's other kids. So what does that mean? We're in competition. I want the toy and they also presumably want the toy. I don't even know if they want the toy, but they're already my enemies. And we do that as adults also. I want that dollar, you want that dollar, now we're enemies. That's really what it is. But the divine soul, the godly soul, the opposite. It sees the oneness. It sees how we're all parts of God. And it wants to bond with other souls. And the divine soul desires to fulfill its God-given mission. And that is why we constantly feel this total struggle. One force lifting us up, one force pulling us down. And as humans, animals are very, very, very unidimensional. They're very specific. Every animal is predictable. Has a nature, the way it's hardwired to be, and it does what it does. Animals don't have internal struggles. Animals are so simple. They're so predictable. You see an animal, you know its nature, you know for a fact it's going to do its nature. Humans, interestingly, we suffer from real deep internal struggles. There's a constant tug-of-war going on inside of us. And this is the story. It's these two souls, the animal soul, the godly soul, the divine soul. And, let's put it up over here, this is the second soul, the godly soul. It's the soul that yearns for a closer relationship with God and to fulfill its divine mission. And these two souls, as I mentioned, are constantly in competition because there's only one little problem. There's two souls, only one body. So the divine soul has a whole life it wants to live. What does the animal soul tell it? No, we're not going anywhere. We're going to stay at home and watch TV. Right? You all know that story? You don't need to go to synagogue today. You went last week already. It's fine. Today you'll sleep in. That's the story. So there's two souls. Each one has a life it wants to live. Each one needs a heart and a mind and feet and hands. It's a life. But there's a constant struggle. And this is really the very story of life. Now, I want to ask you this question. Which of these two souls is the stronger opponent? What would you say, from your experience?
The animal soul.
Animal soul. Anybody else? Do we agree with that? Do you agree with the good soul? Wow, you must be a very holy person. Really? The good soul has the upper hand? That's really beautiful to hear. What else? What else do you say? Look into yourself, look into the world. Objectively, which soul would you say is stronger?
I mean, it's partially a matter of just the animal soul's in control most of the time.
The animal soul.
It's not even necessarily like strength. You know, I need to eat. Godly soul, you set this one out. Who
wins more battles? When they're in conflict, who wins more often? Your godly soul wins more?
I guess not.
Let's be honest.
I don't know.
When it's 10 degrees outside and there's a class that night, they'll say, Rabbi, it's too cold. They said there maybe was ice. I'm going to take an early night. I'm not going to class tonight.
Even if the godly soul wins in the end, but the struggle begins because the animal soul, like you said, you don't want to go out, oh, it's too cold, I stay home. So it begins with this animal soul's wish for comfort.
Right.
And then you have to override it, you can do that, but the initial thing is the animal soul's demand for something.
So let's think about equal demands. All right? It's 10 degrees outside and it's objectively very uncomfortable to go outside. There's a Torah class to come to. It's too cold. I'm not coming up. But if you go to Ford Field or to Comerica Park, you have 80,000 people sitting in that weather, happily, gladly. What happened? Why wasn't the 10-degree weather bothering them?
The animal soul.
The energy of one. The energy.
No effort.
It just, when it shows up and has so much brute force that it just pushes its way through. And the godly soul is sitting there. He's so nice and cute. But you know what I'm saying? He's showing up with a knife to a gunfight. You know, it's just, he doesn't have that strength. You see that. The passion of our animal soul is so much stronger. People get so excited when they go out to a good restaurant, a good piece of steak. They'll make a social media post. Do you have that level of passion when you go to Torah class? Wow, I gotta make a selfie and we'll post it, and this is so exciting. It just, our godly soul just doesn't produce that level of passion and energy, that force of life. It doesn't show up with it. So it's very interesting. On the one hand, we are conflicted beings. And okay, that itself is one problem. But to make matters even worse, which soul is going to be the one who comes with all of its brute force? It's the animal soul. So that can't be too fair, right? The animal soul is significantly more robust than the godly soul. And it shows up with a vengeance. Let's read that in text 2 over here. Text 2, page 113. Daniel, where about you?
The ox's strength produces abundant crops. That is to say, the animal soul's drive is more potent than the godly soul's drive.
There you have it. The fact is, unless you're a very, very holy individual, but if you're like me, the animal soul has a lot more passion and a lot more energy, and we see that in our world today. Which leads us to today's questions. Number 1, why 2 souls? Why does God make us so complicated? Just give us one soul. 2 souls. Each one is at total odds. Why? Number two, why would God give us an opponent soul? Why does God want us to suffer like that? So the first one question is just in general. Why two? And why is this idea that we have to have a conflict? What is up with the conflict? What's the point? Just to make us struggle? So yeah, some people say, yeah, there's value to life in struggling. But on a deeper level, how is this valuable for life? How does this fulfill our purpose? Or is it just, life is better for the struggle? Why the struggle? And perhaps the most important question, how can it be that the animal soul is stronger than the godly soul? How and why? Why is there such an imbalance? So in a certain way, these are questions that touch upon the very essence of life. What are we living for? Why do we struggle so much? And why is it that the struggle makes making the right choices so difficult? It's always at a disadvantage. So this is going to be our opening questions, the opening topic. Two souls, we've got a conflict, but something is not fair. Simple as that. Okay. Keep this question in mind. We are going to now make a deep dive into the world of Kabbalah. Dear friends, let's take a look at our map over here. We've got worlds. These are worlds of independence, worlds of creations. That was lesson number 1. We spoke about the world of Atzilut, the world of God's finite emanations, where God can enter into reality in finite form, which we call the world of Atzilut, the world of the 10 Sefirot. Last week, lesson 3, we spoke about God's infinity, which is beyond the world of Atzilut, which we called Keter, or the Or Ein Sof, divine infinity. And dear friends, if you move a little bit up on your map, we come to a really, really interesting situation over here. Something called Tohu. And what you'll see in Tohu is that stuff are exploding, imploding, shattering. There's action all of a sudden over here. And if you look on the left side over here, we have this red bar that tells us this is chaos. This is a reality of chaos. Under this world of Tohu begins order. This is all beautiful. This is all a system. Today's class is the chaos before the system. There is something called in Kabbalah a world of chaos. Some early form, some early version of creation that somehow ended in disaster, which we call the world of chaos. And stuff broke, stuff shattered. What does this mean? Are any of you familiar? Have you ever heard these terms before? World of chaos, broken vessels. So you've heard the concept a little bit before, yeah? Right. It's somewhat a little bit, but it's a real mystery. Like, what does that mean? So, dear friends, let's explore this world. But I got to make a few opening remarks before we really start jumping in. Let's start by going back. I want to turn back, and Gila, you'll read. Let's turn back to page 8. I want to read text 3. We read this a few weeks ago, one of the opening texts in our book. But I want to go back there now. Let's read text 3 on page 8. Whenever you're ready, yes.
The saint Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov taught that when studying works of Kabbalah, we must be careful not to perceive the Kabbalistic ideas as literal physical concepts.
Let's remind ourselves this word of caution, this golden rule. When you learn Kabbalah, we as humans were prone to process and understand things in very physical, material form, because what do we relate to? 5 senses. But Kabbalah is all teaching us spiritual, mystical reality. It's beyond the 5 senses. It's so much more abstract and refined. And it's very important to strip away and to hold ourselves back from that natural tendency to try to visualize and give a physical interpretation to what we're reading. And that warning is so important for this class. We need to realize, we need to remove all the physical trappings that our mind is going to want to envision of this process. It's not physical reality, it's not material. This is even before time and space. All right, so we've got nothing to work with. These are spiritual concepts, which makes it also very abstract. It's a very abstract class, which makes it very difficult to teach, because the more abstract something is, the less relatable it is. And I got to tell you, I lost a lot of sleep last night trying to figure out how to teach this class properly. So help me God that it's something that is meaningful and impactful, and that it's easy to give a class and confuse everybody and say, oh, we just learned Kabbalah. But as they say in Yiddish, there's no kunz. You know what kunz means? There's no trick. There's no big deal to confuse people, right? The goal is to take something deep and make it relatable, make it approachable. So, but this is the first warning. Let's make sure that we're not taking what we learned today and visualizing it in a physical form. Number two, world of chaos, world of destruction, world of implosion. It sounds like a failure. What we're basically going to learn is that the very first attempt to make a world ended in failure. That is I'm foreshadowing right now, all right? That's a spoiler alert. That's what goes on over here. God had to restart the creation process here, which is the world that we know of. We're right now learning about a reality that happened even before the very genesis, even the spiritual creation of the world as we know it. It was a world that imploded. That's basically the idea of the world of chaos. A primordial state of existence that just wasn't viable. It just couldn't last. But keep this in mind. God don't make no junk, right? Who said that? You know who said that? I don't even know. I know. No, I don't think it's Einstein.
Einstein said something similar. God does not play dice.
God's not right. So right. So there's God's not playing dice. God don't make no junk, and we have to remember that there are no mistakes in the system of reality. And even though we're going to learn that something went wrong, it's all chaos by design. It's chaos for a purpose, as we're going to learn. Okay, but dear friends, how do we begin to understand and wrap our heads around this concept of a world of chaos? So, dear friends, we got to get a little bit of a better understanding of the process of creation. Let's go back to the world of Atzilut, which we spoke about in lesson number 2. The world of Atzilut, which is the very beginning of finite creation, began with God emanating from himself 10 very specific, finite channels of energy, which become the essential building blocks of creation. Right? Now take a look over here. In the world of Tohu, there's also 10 bubbles. The world of Tohu was the first attempt for God to emanate from within himself energy that is finite, which could begin creating finite universe. This was Atzilut version 1. This was the prototype. The prototype failed, and God made version 2, which was the world of Atzilut, which worked out. So in order to understand what the world of chaos is, and what went wrong in the world of chaos, we have to understand the Sefirot a little bit better. The 10 Sefirot, the 10 emanations in the world of Atzilut. Now, we didn't speak about this, and no one asked me. I was wondering if somebody would ask me, but I understand why no one asked. But if you take a look at how on our map we visualize the Sefirot, you will see that there's like 2 parts of each Sefirah, visually at least. You have the general bubble and then you have something going on there on the bottom, like a bottom part of the Sefirah, which is a color-coded. What's that about? There's 2 parts to every single Sefirah. Each Sefirah is divided into 2 components. And visually we have that here as well. What are these 2 components? We're going to read this in the next text, which is from the Zohar, from Kabbalah. Let's read. In general, whenever we read Kabbalistic texts, it's always going to be pretty cryptic, right? So text 3, page 114, Elki. Let's read.
The key is present in the attributes of Atzilut. He and his vessels are one in that word, and he and his lights are one in that word.
Okay. This text is describing Atzilut, And it's telling us something we learned earlier, that the king himself is present within the Sefirot. The Sefirot are not creations, they are emanations from God himself, right? That was the key of lesson number 2. But it says here in this text that God is one with the vessels and he's one with the lights. Ooh. Each Sephirah is made up of light and vessel, which we have here visualized by the energy, the ball of each Sephirah, and then we have a vessel, a container at the bottom of the Sephirah. All right, so now it's getting a little bit more complicating over here, right? What does that mean, light and vessels? Now, the real truth is, light and vessels is a phenomenon that we have throughout all of life. All of nature functions on a relationship between lights and vessels. And dear friends, light and vessels are code words. It doesn't mean that there's lights, and it doesn't mean that now there's vessels that are now holding, right? Strip away all of this. These are code words. These are concepts. These are figures of speech. Light refers to the abstract energy behind anything. The raw, abstract energy. Vessels is the structure that shapes and defines that energy and then executes it. Let me give you a few examples. You'll see light and vessels is part of life. Look on page 115. Here we got a few examples. In a book, imagine you're an author. What are the lights? What's the light of the book? It's the ideas. What do you want to share? What do you have inside of you? What is the vessel? The words. How you write it. If you have big ideas, you've got a lot of energy. But what do you then need to do with those, with all that light? You need to force it into a structure. You need to choose how you're going to say it. You have to choose in what order you're going to make your presentation. So words become the structure and the definition and the execution of the ideas. Let's go to... Okay. Let's go to... Give me a second here. Okay. Next example, a song, a melody. Imagine you're a composer, musical composer. Every song has to have emotion. What do you want to share? But just emotion is not good enough. Then you have to now translate. A good composer is able to take an emotion and translate it into musical notes, into a composition. And the composition now gives a form, a definition, a structure, and it executes that emotion, and it allows it to be something concrete. It's very interesting. I saw this a few months ago when ChatGPT, right, the AI chat, started becoming popular. So one of the things that you're able to do it is say, please compose for me a song. And it would give you, chords, guitar chords. So musical artists were getting worried. One second, are we out of business? So they tried it, and they gave it to some top artists in America to test out AI music, and they all said the same thing. It's music without soul. Yeah, there's a rhythm, there's a pattern, but they're flat. There's no depth. That is a vessel without light. Yeah, you got a song, but this it doesn't contain anything. But let's think about a song as well. If you're a composer and you have a certain emotion, you write a song to it. You could also write a different song that conveys the exact same emotion, but it's a different song because the emotion is raw energy. And the vessel now limits and defines and gives a very, very specific execution for this energy. But there could also be another vessel for this energy. So the energy is always going to be raw and abstract and endless possibilities. And the vessel is always coming and constricting it, forcing it into this very, very narrow space You're going to be expressing yourself by doing exactly this and in this order and in this specific way, and that's what it is. Same thing about a business. Light is the vision, vessel is the strategy. If you've got a business with vessels and no light, strategy and no vision, the company, it's empty. Well, no one knows what we're doing over here. No one knows why we're working. There are some companies, by the way, like that. There's no ambition. Nothing's happening. Yes?
I have a question. So looking at the diagram here.
Yes.
The vessel is the colored area underneath, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And so, I guess logically, I would think that the vessel is holding something, the light is coming out of, but really it's not, because,
Light goes into the vessel.
right.
Right. Like,
It's kind of like the opposite of how you're looking at it.
no, it's like the light comes down from above, and then there's, at the lowest part of it, there's a vessel that forces the light to be expressed in a very specific way. So first there's energy, first there's the light, and then comes the vessel. Another example, by the way, same thing with a business. If you've got vision, but you've got no strategy, what happens to such businesses? It's not going to work, right? A relationship, love and action. The emotion of love, but just an emotion of love is not enough. What does there need to be in a healthy relationship? It has to be expression. Acts of mutual love, of mutual connection. That energy is translated, is now able to be executed in a very specific way, in a hug, in an action, in taking out the garbage. Meaning that itself is an expression of what happens in a relationship if you have only vessel, only actions, but there's no love, there's no light. What then happens? It's empty. It's not really going to work. On the other hand, imagine a relationship where there's a lot of love, but there's no specific containment. There's no specific expression. It's like a fantasy. I don't know. It's hard to imagine. What is such a there's no real. You're stuck in your own head. There's no expression. The vessel allows the light to have a certain form of expression. Last example of religion, you got the beliefs, that's the light, and then you have the rituals, which are the vessels. Okay. I want to make sure that we appreciate this concept. There's light and vessels. It's all throughout life. The raw energy, the abstract energy which is beyond any specific form of expression. And even when it's expressed in a certain way, that's only one limited version of what this light could be. And then you have a vessel which gives it specific structure. I want to give you two code words, okay? Just remember this. Vessels do two functions. They give structure and they give execution. Structure meaning we now have something real to work with. The love is expressed in something very specific. The emotion of a song is being expressed in this very specific tune. This book is now ready for you to read. And I want to understand with you, I want to make sure we understand how these are indispensable. One cannot exist and function without the other. Light without vessels. If you want to write a book, but you're just too overwhelmed, you can't get these ideas into words. Do you have a book? You got nothing. You have no structure, so therefore you have no execution. If you got a great emotion, but you're not going to put it into a song as well, you got no song. Great, so on and so forth. And on the other hand, if you only have vessels, it's empty. There's nothing driving it. There's nothing giving it a force. But they both need each other. The light gives the energy, the vessel gives structure and execution. Let's go to the world of Atzilut. When God decided to emanate from within himself 10 specific channels of divine energy, which are the 10 Sefirot, he first emanated from his infinite self 10 raw channels of energy. But these 10 raw, abstract lights are not anything yet. They're 10. You could count them, but that's it. What are they? No one knows. They don't have yet a structure. They don't yet have a definition. They don't have yet a purpose. And they aren't doing anything yet. There's no execution.
No vessel.
Then God emanated also from within himself the energy which is all about vessel. And what that does is, it takes that light and forces that light to enter a very specific constraint, a very specific definition. This light is right now doing this, and it's going to be expressed in this specific way, and therefore we could call it a very specific name. And it's with this relationship between light and vessels that the world of Atzilut functions, that each of these 10 divine energies are able to produce another energy of our world, and God can now interact with the world, give energy and flow to the world in these 10 specific modalities. So because you have lights and because you have vessels, there's structure and there is execution. Something is happening. We're able to share this light. The light can do something beyond itself. Let's read text 4a. Would you like to read?
You know what, I forgot my grade.
That's okay. Max, we're back at you. Text 4a, page 116.
From abstract to defined. The light itself is in a state of simple abstractness. The vessel imposes a definition on the light in the form of particular attributes of wisdom, kindness, and so forth.
Right? What's an analogy? I was trying to think to myself yesterday, what's a good analogy for this? What does that mean? Where do we have this in our own lives? That all of a sudden there's a tremendous force of raw light, raw energy, and then, which is abstract, it doesn't mean anything yet, and then we have to invest it into vessels. So I'll give you two examples. The second example is better, but I'll give you both. Imagine your child comes home from school one day, and he's in tears, and he says, I was bullied on the playground by this kid. Now, if you're a parent, what is your reaction? There's an immediate gush of energy. That's a punch in the gut. My kid is not allowed to be hurt like this, right? So you right now have raw, abstract energy, which we will call light. All right? So you got a lot of energy now. But that energy is, what are you going to do with that energy? Now you have to choose how you are going to channel that energy. In other words, you now have to take that energy and put it into a vessel. But what type of vessel will you put it into? Well, there's all types. You could either translate that energy into compassion for your child. You're going to spend more time with your child that night. You're going to help him work through it. You'll give him even more love and even more support and even more security. That energy could turn into harshness. You're going to call up that kid's father and give it to him over the head. Do you know what your kid did to my kid? Right? I'm coming to school tomorrow. Tell your kid to be ready, right? Right, not that, right? Don't do that. Okay. You could also go to the principal's office the next day and scream at him. And there's so many other possibilities. What are you going to do right now? So you've got energy building up, but now you have to give it a containment. If you have all this energy and emotion because of your son told you he got bullied, but if you don't put it into a container, into a containment, into a specific structure, then what happens with that energy? Nothing. It's raw abstract energy that ultimately never takes on a form. It doesn't do it. It doesn't execute. So the energy, the light, has to go into a vessel. And that vessel then is able to give structure to that energy. Now we are going to do this, and this energy is going to mean this, and then executes that. And I'll give you another example, which I think is maybe even a better example, of a very raw energy, which needs containment. So, Baruch Hashem, God blessed me with 4 children. And my reaction, the very moment that I hear that first cry of my child when they're born, is I can't help but cry. I'm so overwhelmed, I just start crying. Okay. What am I feeling? Let's try to define that feeling. What is that feeling?
Energy.
It's energy. It's raw. No one even knows what I'm feeling. I'm not feeling.
It's everything.
It's everything. Meaning, so it's actually interesting. But the first child, you could say maybe it was fear. Maybe I'm crying at it, meaning it's like, wow, this is real. Like, we enter the hospital and we're just a cute little couple and we can do whatever we want, whenever we want. We can go to sleep whatever time of night. We can wake up whatever time in the morning. We can do whatever you want. Carefree. And now, it's real. You got a child. But child number 4, when my Chana was born, it wasn't overwhelming at all in that sense. Like, I wasn't crying out of overwhelmedness. The opposite. I was like, we could do it, no problem. Yeah, new baby. We're back at work the next day. It was like but I'm still overwhelmed. So it's an overwhelming energy. That is an abstract light. Raw, what is that energy now going to mean? It can mean lots of things. I got to now find containers, vessels for that light. It's going to translate into love for my child. All the love that I can, that's the energy now entering into that. It will also now be invested into a sense of security. I want to make sure that my child is safe and doesn't get into trouble. And we all know the visceral feeling of a parent of not wanting the children to get into trouble, not wanting them to get hurt. So that's another form of how that same abstract energy, there's a different container that could give it a very different type of definition and form. It could also be more ambition, to make more money. I need to bring in more to be able to support the family. It could be all types of, what are you going to do with this energy? That's already the question of vessels. So the energy itself is beyond definition. It's raw, it's abstract, and it's unexecutable. The best you can do is cry. Doesn't help anybody, right? All right, so you feel an emotion, you're overwhelmed, but it's not even an emotion. That's the thing. An emotion means you're feeling something. Love, hate, kindness, appreciation. There's some form of emotion. Over here, you're not even feeling a specific emotion. It's just you're overwhelmed. Something is happening inside of you. You don't even know what. Now you got to choose what that is going to be. You have to find vessels. So this is what God does. God emanated first raw energy and then gave it specific structures, which are the 10 divine sefirot. This relationship, the symbiotic relationship between light and vessels. There's only one little problem. And I'll tell you that to you in a second. Just right now I want to make sure we get the concepts properly filed. First concept is called lights. Orot, the lights. What are lights? The abstract divine energies that are closely tied to their source, but are primed to produce divine attributes. So the light itself is raw. The light itself is unexecutable. It's not doing anything. But God created them, or emanated them, these specific 10 channels, to eventually turn into the Sefirot. And then we have the other side of the equation, the vessels, or the Kelim. That's actually the Hebrew word, a vessel, a jar, a Keli. What is this? The divine entities of definition and structure that define the lights and channel their energy to the lower worlds. The raw light on its own can't create. With the vessels, now we can execute. Now it could be a force that is starting to function, is starting to shear, is starting to create, release energy and guiding worlds, creating worlds. There's only one little problem. And it's very important to understand this. On the one hand, the light needs the vessels. Because light without vessels are nothing. They're meaningless. And the vessels need light. Because what's a vessel without light? What's a hug if there's no emotion? What's a book if you've got nothing to write about? Some authors are like that. We need to write a book. What are we going to write? We don't even know. We're going to write a book. Those books don't end up being bestsellers, right? Why? Because just like, what is going on here? The author himself is trying to figure out what he's about to write. I don't even know what to write. I'll write something. By the way, columnists really suffer from that. Some of these other columnists write in a newspaper, and it's like unbelievable. You know for a fact they sat down, they're like, I have no clue what I'm going to write about, but we got to write. Because I've got a quota, I got to give it 1,000 words to this newspaper. So we're going to pick a fight. We'll figure. You can tell. So lights need vessels. Vessels need light. But I want you to appreciate this. Listen closely. Light and vessels don't get along. Why not? Because they're opposites. Lights are raw and abstract, and they're just raw emanations, raw reflections of the powerful source of that light. And it is very, very robust, very energetic, very, very dynamic. There's so much possibility here in the light. And the light never wants to lose touch, so to speak. Like if you could get into the mind of lights, the energy behind anything, it doesn't want to be contained. Because to be contained means to strip away all of its power and to be forced to only be one very specific thing. Lights don't like that. Does that make sense? I'll give you an example for this in a moment. Vessels as well. Vessels are all about containment, structure, definition. We're doing this. And execution. We can't execute unless we... And the light agitates it. The light has so much energy and power. And it goes against the nature of the vessels, which is all about a very specific structure. And you see this in life. It is very, very easy for the relationship between lights and vessels to be overwhelmed. Whenever you've got lots of lights, what happens? It can't be contained by vessels. Elon Musk cannot work for anybody. Why? He's got too much energy. He's too much of a visionary. He can't work under, and a CEO is all about structure and order and processes, and you do this, and here's a schedule, and here's the timeline. That's vessels. If you're too much of a visionary, what do you say? I can't handle this. I cannot handle this. The more creative somebody is, the less they can work with a schedule. Right? I have too much light going on. I can't fit into containments. There's a natural tension between these two. You see this about great intellectuals. The smarter somebody is, the more brilliant they have, the less they want to interact with people. They don't want to talk to you. Why not? They're so obsessed with the energy. Their head is in this raw space of abstract energy that to start giving classes and to start dealing with people, that's too much containment. And there's a natural tension. Albert Einstein was not a social person. He said this himself. They offered him to be the very first president of Israel, right? And what did he say? He says, please give the job. I says, I'm very, very honored, but I'm not going to accept the job because I don't know how to work with people. I don't like people. Why not? He's just too brilliant. He has too much going on. He can't deal with structures. I want to be a politician and start dealing with people and talk to people. Show up here, show up there. You got a meeting. I can't do that. So light and vessels are always in a little bit of a precarious relationship. And it is easy for that relationship to suffer from a breakdown. Okay? Because they're opposites. And we have to appreciate that. These are two opposite forces. Let's read text 4b about how the relationship works in the world of Atzilut. Daniel, page 116.
Able to provide. The lights of Atzilut, by their very nature, are abstract. They also aspire to return to their source and become wholly subsumed within their sublime origin. Accordingly, they are far removed from creating the worlds of Beriah, Yetzirah, and Asiya. Rather, the lights must first install themselves in the vessel of Atzilut in order to energize the creation of the worlds.
The light itself doesn't want to become a specific, functioning, structured force of energy that can now create worlds, that can now be executed to move outward and move downward. It wants to remain true to its core vision, to the core light. This is what Kabbalah teaches. There's always going to be that structure, that natural tension. But in the world of Atzilut, it works. The light and the vessels come together, just like we experience as well. Lights and sometimes takes a little bit of effort, by the way, you'll realize that. It takes effort to make that relationship between light and efforts, between lights and vessels. Lights and vessels need to get along. Sometimes it takes a lot of effort. Like if I'm preparing a class, you know what one of the hardest things of teaching a class is? How am I going to teach it? I know what I want to say, but how am I going to say it? And if I don't think in my mind, how am I going to say it, you know what's going to happen when I show up to the class? It's not going to be a good class. Why not? Because I see so much light and the ideas shining in my brain, but I have no containment. Where am I starting? Where am I ending? You know, there has to be a flow. A bad class, if you ever could tell when I give a bad class, when I'm trying to say everything at once. I myself don't even understand where I'm going. It's just there's no containment, there's no execution. It takes a lot of effort to constrain and limit and just hold down that energy and force it into a structure. That is not an easy do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Right? Okay, very good. This is so we have to appreciate that it's not an easy process. Atzilut is where it happens successfully. Well, I'll put this up over here. I want to put this up over here on the screen. The lights, the orot, are abstract. They're not defined. And the natural desire of light is it wants to stay true to its source and not be channeled elsewhere. Meaning, I'm raw light, I want to remain raw light. Don't strip me down. Don't force me into the straitjacket of a vessel. Now, of course, lights don't have their own consciousness that there's. But if you gotta, like what Disney does, just stick a nose and eyes and a mouth on anything and give it a little bit of personality. So if you can give a little bit of personality to lights, it's telling you I don't want to change. Please don't force me to go into the jail of a vessel. I want to be who I am. I want to be true to who I am. I want to be true to the source of my energy. Comes the vessels, and vessels is the energy of no. We're all about definition and structure. What are we doing? What are we trying to say over here? And the vessel is imposing that energy and that constriction upon the lights. And the vessels are interested in executing downward and outward. That's what a vessel is. It's channeling. What are we going to do with this energy? How are we going to share with it down to the next level? The problem is the light doesn't want to go down to the next level because then it has to define itself. It doesn't want to be expressed. So if you have to go into the personalities of lights and vessels, this is what they're telling you. And there's a clash. Let's read text 4c, page 118. Gila.
Lights and vessels are inherently opposites. The lights by their very nature are abstract. They also aspire to return to their source and to become wholly subsumed within their sublime origin. By contrast, vessels have a defined nature. They desire to retain their configuration and are naturally inclined to descend to lower realms.
There we have it. So there's a natural tension, but it works, right? It works. In the world of Atzilut, God makes it work. But let's not take it for granted that it works. Because the first time God tried doing this, you know what happened? Oh, let's talk about the world of chaos. Now that we understand what lights are, what vessels are, what the dynamic, what the relationship is, now we can understand what the world of chaos is. And it all begins with the very, very beginning of creation. The way the Torah begins. Elki, let's read text 5, page 119, the very opening words of the Torah.
In the beginning of God's creation of the heavens and the earth was corrupt and desolate. Darkness was on the surface of the deep, and God's spirit hovered over the water. God said, "Let there be light," and there was light.
Okay, let's talk about the narrative over here. In the beginning, God's creating. What's the first step? This is text 5, you see? What's the first step? Chaos and desolation. Darkness. And we have God's Spirit hovering over the water. And then we have let there be light. Now, you can look in the commentaries in the Torah, and they'll tell you the simple meaning of these verses. It's part of the narrative. Okay, it's part of the story. But comes Kabbalah and says, let there be light is referring to the creation of Atzilut. And before Atzilut, which is the very first step of God's emanation, of God's light, entering into creating a reality, there was first a stage of chaos, of desolation, of darkness, with the Spirit of God hovering over the water. What does this mean? It doesn't refer to physical creation. This is primordial spiritual reality. Text 6 on page 120. Max, we're back at you.
The breaking. The earth was chaotic and desolate. This refers to the breaking of the vessels. God's Spirit hovered over the waters. This refers to the lights that the vessels failed to absorb.
Ooh, what is going on over here? There's chaos, there's breaking of the vessels. And then you have the godly Spirit hovering over the water. That's the light that the vessels couldn't absorb. Who broke the vessels? What does that mean, vessels are breaking? And light can't be absorbed? What's going on over here? This is the world of Tohu. What is the world of Tohu? The world of chaos. Tohu means, that's the word in the Torah. The land was Tohu, chaos. What happened here? Let's read this next text. And it's a little bit of a cryptic text. But now, with all that we've learned, we can start deciphering what went wrong in the world of Tohu. And by the way, as I said earlier, God don't make no junk. It actually it didn't go wrong, it was actually right. But, right? It imploded, but it was for a purpose. It was by design. Okay, we got to talk about that. We'll get there soon. Daniel, text 7a.
Clinging to the source, the lights of Tohu were intense and powerful. They intensely desired to be nullified and subsumed within their emanating source. They had no sense of what their source wanted of them. As a result, they failed to deviate from their default nature for the sake of submitting to their greater purpose.
All right. Let's talk a little bit about this. Lights naturally want to not be defined, and they want to just simply stay true and close to the source of that light. The vessels are forcing containment. What happens in the first version of God trying to emanate energies? God released, as the very opening of this text says, the lights were very intense and powerful. The very first trial of reality was with very powerful lights. What happened to those lights? The lights overwhelmed the vessels. The lights were so strong that the vessels couldn't rein them in. So they couldn't be contained. And the vessels were also so strong and powerful, and they had so much force of constraint and constriction, that it also wouldn't allow raw light to enter into its. So the way it worked was, and don't think of this as physical reality, right? This is a very spiritual concept, which is abstract. The energy went into the vessels and immediately left. It overwhelmed the vessels, and what happened in the world of Tohu was, just look at what happens over here. All the lights were too intense. They didn't want to become defined Sefirot, and the light simply went away. The lights went back home. They stopped shining. And all that was left were the 10 empty vessels. Whew, what does that mean? Let's try to give a little bit of an example. What is an example when there's the lights are too powerful, too intense, that it's not only difficult to put it into vessels, but that it actually causes a certain breakdown of the system? The example is fainting. What happens when you faint? Emotional fainting. You hear a piece of news, and it is such a shocking piece of news that the light that emerges is so strong that your vessels cannot process this light. And it just totally shuts down the system. Is that a good example?
Yeah.
And there's also the idea of going into shock. let's not talk about fainting, but you hear a great piece of news or a horribly sad piece of news, and you go numb. What happens first is all that energy goes out, and it totally overwhelms the system. Your vessels can't contain that light. But the vessels want to contain the light, because that's what naturally has to happen. But the light is not in moderation where, okay, this is something we could hold on to and rein in. No, these lights are just blazing through and so what happens? The lights just simply, it goes back, and the system goes into shutdown. One final example, which is a physical example. If you have a cup and you put it under a faucet, if it's a nice steady stream of water, the water goes into the cup. But like in the olden days, before they put filters to hold back the stream of water, you would open it up a sink and it would come out with full force. All that water pressure of the pipe, and what happens to your cup? No water. That's the nature of the light. It doesn't want to be contained. So we're not even.
No.
It just jumps right out. It jumps right out. It doesn't flow over. It's an amazing thing. Nothing is left. So the power of the flow of light itself breaks down the system. This is what happened in the world of Tohu. God releases unbelievable energy, which was the first version of reality, which would be a much stronger force of divine revelation than the reality we know of. The only problem was it was too much, too powerful. And the light and the vessels were simply overwhelming each other. There was no way this could happen. It was like an unhappy marriage. Each one wants out, and that is indeed what happened. And what happened was the vessels remained, and the light went away. We have dead, broken vessels. We have vessels that once upon a time contained the highest form of divine energy and now are just floating in space. Again, right, that's not physical, but we have something that is broken, that doesn't serve a function anymore. And then God says, okay, let's try it again. And this time, let's do it a little bit simpler. Let's tone it down. Atzilut was the second attempt, version 2. Let's see if we could do the same project, but just less intense light, less intense vessels. Oh, it works. Just like a regular motion within us. The light in the vessels, even though sometimes there's friction, it works. Doesn't all get overwhelming. And that's the world of Atzilut. Atzilut works. Tohu doesn't work. Okay, let's make sure we're getting down the definitions. Okay, right? There was a breakdown of Tohu. The vessels couldn't contain the lights. And that is the word Tohu. We have in your books as well on page 123. Tohu, the world of chaos, is a system in which divine orot, lights, and kalim, vessels, fail to integrate, resulting in the lights returning to their source and the vessels remaining without light. Yes?
I have a question.
Sure.
When was this first discovered, this whole,
When was it first written in a approachable way in a book? By the Arizal, the great Kabbalist of Tzfat, who lived about 500 years ago. He is the one who gave us, who codified the system, but it's really in the Torah in a certain way, Tohu. The Medrash speaks about it, that before our world was created, God was making worlds and they were getting destroyed. It wasn't working. So the vague idea is part of traditional Judaism, but the Arizal revealed the exact system behind it.
So this much of the Torah in the beginning explains that all of this.
Everything is hidden.
wow,
Everything is there in one word and 2 words.
wow.
The layers and layers and layers, the endless layers of meaning behind every single phrase in the Torah, for sure. Everything is there. Okay. So that's the world of Tohu. It didn't work. The vessels remained without any lights. And we call that breaking of the vessels. When the vessels can no longer lend definition to the lights, but become standalone entities. The vessels remained. That's what Kabbalah explains. The vessels remained, but no more light. And that's a broken vessel. And then we said God decided to then try it over again. Okay, let's start over again from scratch. And now God made that there should be moderate lights that are able to be integrated within the vessels, and that we call tikkun. What does tikkun mean? To rectify. Okay, now we're going to do it right. And that is why, if you look over here, this is chaos. We call this down here order. That's tikkun. The system of order. Atzilut created function and health to the system. And we call this tikkun, correction, which means it's the second emanation of the Sefirot, in which the lights and vessels are more moderate, allowing them to remain paired with each other. Dear friends, we don't have that much time left, but we got to now bring this home. And please forgive me if I may be going over a few minutes over, which is good because I know you don't have to go to the office tomorrow. So till what time are we going to be here tonight? Okay. No. I don't want to go too out of too much time over here. This is the Kabbalah of Tohu and Tikkun, the world of chaos, and then the system of order that we've learned about previously. What's the obvious question? Why in the world did God do this? Now, we all make mistakes. For example, I may try preparing a class, and I'll spend an hour starting to figure, and then all of a sudden realize, not bad strategy. So what am I going to do? Start over from scratch. That's basically our own world of chaos. We try creating a system, the system doesn't work anymore. Okay, well, that's enough. For us humans, we're allowed to have the prototype, which failed, then we'll do version 2. God doesn't make mistakes. Right? God doesn't play dice. He's emanating these energies. He knows exactly what's happening, what doesn't happen. So why is God making this whole system? And the answer is it's intention. It's intention. Every single step along this map has a function, including the step which ended up in chaos, in desolation, in implosion. These failed vessels that remained behind in the world of Tohu stayed even as the rest of creation unfolded. These chaotic vessels, broken vessels, remain a part of our universe. And they serve a very important function. You see, there's one little problem with the system of tikkun, of Atzilut. You know what that problem is? The lights aren't strong. The lights aren't intense. They're weaker. Well, we had to make them weak because it's the only way it could work. But you know what the only drawback is? It's missing some of that passion. God would much rather have stronger energy, stronger divine energy in this world. But it couldn't work. But God still wanted to have some of that very, very powerful divine energy within the world. So what did God do? God created a system where he did invest all that very powerful energy. And it didn't work. But those vessels remained behind. And those vessels once housed that intense light. And those vessels also have residual light still within it. And these broken vessels with unbelievably powerful energy re-emerge in creation. What do they re-emerge as? They re-emerge as the powerful forces in our universe that are so powerful but are out of sync of the whole system. They are broken. What does broken mean? They're not part of the system. And what is that? Evil, negativity. The forces of nature that are not in tune to the divine system. They act independent. They don't even know what their identity is. They're missing light. They're missing enlightenment. They're missing purpose. They're missing identity. It is a wild, ferocious form of energy and execution and function, but it's missing focus. It doesn't even know what it is. And that mostly reemerges in our lowest world, the physical asiya. The most powerful energies, which we call the broken vessels of Tohu, reemerge in our world as the stuff that are broken. As the stuff that, as we see, are so unbelievably powerful, but are so out of control. It's like a machine. What happens in a machine in a factory when all of a sudden it malfunctions? You have all the energy of the machine, but it stops working normally. And then the machine just goes into overdrive and starts going crazy, right? Sometimes watch these videos of like a machine in a factory. It becomes like a force of destruction, right? The world of Torah has all those broken vessels that lost functionality, lost touch with the system that it's part of. And any force in our universe that is apathetic of God and that is not in sync with the larger system, that is Tohu. So the amazing thing is that we began our class and we began our exploration of Tohu as some weird abstract reality all the way beyond the observable universe, right? And now we're saying, no, Kabbalah says that's the world we live in. We actually live in that world. And we actually have a miniature version of this reality within us. We got two souls. Our godly soul, we said, comes from the world of Atzilut. Remember? We said you have a piece of God within you. It comes from one of these Sefirot. It's pure, it's holy. But then you've got an animal soul. And the animal soul is from the world of Tohu. Let's read this in text 8. On page 125. And after this text, I want to discuss a little bit more with you how we see the parallels. Our animal soul fits perfectly the description, the qualities, the properties of the world of Tohu. Text 8. Are we by you, Elki? Or by you, Gila? Who just read last? Who read last? Gila, read. Don't worry. We still got some more. Okay, so Gila, go ahead. Text 8, page 125.
Okay. We are comprised of both Tohu and Tikkun. Our godly souls are products of Tikkun and are therefore inherently subservient to God. Our animal souls and bodies are products of the broken vessels of Tohu. Although inanimate objects, plants, and animals are also linked with Tohu, the concept of separation from God is far more pronounced in humans. That is because all other things cannot sin and therefore do not become completely separated from God. Humans, by contrast, on account of our bodies and animal souls, are capable of sin and consequently of becoming far more separated from God.
Here we have the basic idea. Godly souls are from the world of Tikkun, and the animal soul comes from Tohu. So let's discuss this a little bit more. Let's talk a little bit about our animal souls. And we'll see that everything we just spoke about the world of Tohu is actually true. We see it in our animal souls. Okay, point number 1. Which world comes first? Tikkun, Atzilut, or Tohu? Who's first? Who's higher? Tohu. Which soul do we experience first when we are born? Animal soul. By the way, why do we celebrate a bar mitzvah at 13 and a bas mitzvah at 12? What exactly is happening at 13 and 12?
Getting in touch with the divine soul.
With the divine soul. It takes 13 years for a boy, 12 years for a girl to get fully in touch with the divine soul. The divine soul is late to the party. Johnny, come lately. Right? All right. The animal soul had time to make itself comfortable, set up its, right, he got the best bed, the best positions. All of a sudden, 13 years, the godly soul starts moving in. All right, So who shows up first? Animal souls first, just like Tohu is first. Which world has more power? The world of Tohu or the world of Atzilut, the world of Tikkun?
Tikkun.
More power?
Oh, power.
Which one has more intense power? Tohu. That was what went wrong. There was too much power. Same thing with the animal soul. A lot more powerful energy. The godly soul has wonderful energy, but when you stack it up with the animal soul comes just such brute force. it's got just tremendous energy. And just like the world of Tohu ended up in broken vessels that became out of touch and out of sync with any system, with any with the larger purpose, that is exactly what our animal souls are. They are vessels full of energy, but they're broken. Which means, number one, they're not in touch with the divine energy that they were once made up of. The animal soul doesn't care about God, doesn't know about God. All that energy becomes self-directed. It's all about me. And it's also a broken vessel. There's no meaning. The animal soul has no clue how to make a meaningful life. It becomes a bottomless pit of just more gratification, more hedonism, which ends up in depression, which just ends up in an empty, horrible life. That's what's broken about it. A powerful vessel that once housed very powerful lights, but now has lost touch with that light. And all it's doing is, it's just a broken machine. Working on steroids, but it's out of touch, it's out of sync. Doesn't even know what it's doing.
So we're back to Elon Musk.
We're not going to talk about that. Is he Tohu? I don't know. Let's talk about our own animal souls. Our own animal souls are the exact miniature version. It's not even a miniature version. It comes from there. The world of Tohu manifests in ourselves. And that is why our animal soul is the stronger opponent. It shows up first. It's more powerful. But why would God do that to us? Why would God then put us into a body with two souls, a godly soul and an animal soul, and now we have to struggle with them? The answer is because God doesn't want us just to function with low-level energy. God wants us to somehow have access to the powerful energy of Tohu. We couldn't get that directly. The animal soul is not just your enemy, it is actually secretly and unbeknownst to it, your greatest ally and the secret of your greatest powers. You see, the animal soul comes from a holy place. And the animal soul has tremendous potential. But right now, all that potential is broken. It's lost touch with purpose. The secret of life, according to Kabbalah, and what God wants of us out of life, is to take our godly soul and to try as hard as possible to rein in that animal soul and redirect its energy back into the system. Who fixes the broken vessels of Tohu? We do. It happens inside of us. All of life is really spiritual. Even the negative, the spiritual potential is there. And it's not just a nice thing to make holy and to make spiritual, the non-spiritual, the mundane, but if you could tap into the energy of the non-holy, you have access to unbelievable energy that the system itself can't contain. In terms of our life, the goal is to somehow tap into the energy of our animal soul and harness it to be a part of the life of our godly soul. Can you imagine if we could do a mitzvah, not just with the energy of the godly soul, because the godly soul at the end of the day is a little bit weak when it comes to energy. Can you imagine if you could do a mitzvah with the power and the passion of your animal soul? That's amazing. So how do you do it? That's a big question. But let's read this text. I want to jump to text 12 on page 129. Text 12, Elke, were we by you? Now? Yeah.
Text 12. Great passion. The animal soul is tremendously powerful due to its lofty source. Consequently, also it has fallen far below. It continues to generate far greater passion than the godly soul can produce on its own.
Comes Chassidus, comes Kabbalah and says, your job is to engage with that broken vessel, with your animal soul, and reconnect all that light back into the system. And this is really the Kabbalah of what we call Tikkun Olam. It's not just our animal soul. Everything in this world is broken. Everything in this world is out of place. The way God created the world is that there's a system, there's an order. We live in the world where there's no order. Everything that exists just seems to exist for itself. Powerful, powerful forces that ultimately what? Are out of touch with any purpose, with any meaning, with any system. The job of a Jew is to fix that again. Bring all those puzzle pieces back. And take all that lost energy, so powerful, and create that unity, the order. Reveal the holiness and the goodness and the godliness in everything in our world, even the animalistic. Now, how do you do this? Ooh. We have to somehow get in touch with our animal soul and leverage its power by persuasion. Inspire it to join us along. It's also one of the greatest ideas for education. How do you get a young Jewish child to be interested in Judaism? Young children don't like being interested in religion, right? So what are you going to do? You try guilting them? You got to do it. Right? Guilting kids into religion doesn't work. You have to somehow take their passion of the animal soul and tap into it and use that excitement and connect it to the godly soul. That's the secret of life. That's the purpose for what we're living for. One more text, then we're going to do our meditation. Text 9 Max on page 126.
Rectification. All of the mitzvot are designed exclusively to purify the animal soul and mortal body. By contrast, the divine soul does not require rectification. It has no intrinsic need to become installed within an animal soul and mortal body. The sole purpose for doing so is for it to illuminate and rectify them. Understand this well. The reason the soul descends to this world is to rectify and purify.
We are here to engage with our animal soul and bring back those broken pieces. Harness its energy, and that can only happen by them breaking and us reintroducing them back to what all that energy is really all about. Part of the godly purpose. Part of the very reason why the world was created. But dear friends, to understand that, we'll have to keep on learning in the upcoming classes. Let's finish up with this. The animal soul is a powerful, godly force. It's a godly force, which simply lost touch with itself, lost touch with its true nature. But this soul is not evil, it's not bad, it can be reharnessed. All we got to do is somehow re-engage that light and reintroduce it to who it really is. And the rectification is when the body and the animal soul are reconnected to God's will, and then they become operational vessels. That is the redemption. That is the rectification. Dear friends, as we conclude, we have our lesson meditation nigun. Actually, the meaning behind the song is about struggle. You'll hear it in this nigun has a name. It doesn't have words, but the name is called the Beinani. What's the Beinani? The struggling person of the Tanya. This song is named after the Beinani. This song conveys the emotional struggle of the Beinani in musical form. Right? So that's the energy. This is the light in the vessels. Okay, so here's our nigun. You ready?
Yeah.
Here we go. How was that? That was a nice niggin? Did you feel the light inside the vessel? Dear friends, with that, it's a wrap for tonight. Have a happy Thanksgiving. Have a wonderful Shabbos. And next week, the great concealment as we move out to lesson 5 next week. Have a wonderful evening, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining, for coming out over here even on such a tough night.
Beautiful. Thank
And the mission is to, we need to somehow harness all that passion and energy of our animal soul. That's what life's all about.